My name is Dr. Dan, and I'll be here today's host seminar. I have a doctorate degree in organizational leadership and communication with a minor in quantum physics. I'm also a practicing therapist, and I cover areas or subjects such as self-esteem issues. I do also marital and relationship counseling. You can actually get my information right below on the lower thirds. Now, today's seminar will be covering the how-tos in understanding the men and women. And I have 3 guest panelists and professionals that will be able to share their expertise in making this seminar a really good one. So we're going to start with Rita.
Hi.
And each and everyone will be able to describe themselves.
Okay, well, my name is Rita Goodrow, and I am a recovered attorney who I was a business attorney for about 13 years and ended up through a long story becoming a dating and relationship coach. And now I do business coaching, but I still dabble in the dating and relationship coaching as well. So communication between the genders is an issue both while you're dating and also in business, right? With sales and with marketing and communication. So that issue comes up everywhere across the board. So I'm really excited to be here today.
Thank you very much for being here today,
Thank
Rita.
you.
Mr. Dave.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Dan. Good to be back. I'm really pleased to be here. My name is Dave Elliott. I'm with Legendary Love for Life. I work with a lot of singles and couples all over the world via Skype in my practice, and I mostly help single people who are looking for love and having some challenges with it, maybe have some wounds to heal, or to just understand the topic we're going to talk about today, which is communication between the sexes and genders, I should say. And also specifically help in the area of communication on the online dating profile. I wrote a book called The Catch Your Match Formula, and we talked about that last time I was here. So it's good to be back. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Marjorie.
Hi, my name is Marjorie Corpel, and I'm a licensed therapist in Bethesda. I'm the founder of the Counseling Center of Maryland, and I work with a lot of couples, couples looking at getting engaged, a lot of people in the dating world. I do a lot of therapy from the Gottman perspective, which is really helpful. I also tie in dialectic behavior therapy, mindfulness, to help couples be more in the moment and do what they can in their relationships.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for being here today. I am sure that your insight will just be amazing for everyone who's watching this seminar and to our attendees here today. So I'm going to start asking questions to each and every one of you, and you just basically kind of give me your insight, your feedback. Now, Rita, you believe that chemistry is a combination of multiple factors and that people aren't providing the proper space for it to truly develop. Can you please elaborate?
Yeah, sure. So when it comes to attraction, right, the way that people usually deal with it, it needs to be instant. You know, they talk about that instant chemistry, right? Oh, I went out on a date with, usually I work with women, so I'm gonna speak from the perspective of a woman right now, but I went out on a date with a guy and I don't know, there just wasn't that chemistry there, so I'm not gonna go out with him again, right? And I'll say, what I explain to them is that chemistry happens on a couple of different levels. So you have kind of your intellectual chemistry, and you have emotional chemistry, so that's like your judgments and your beliefs and your morals. You have physical chemistry, obviously, and you also kind of have like this inner spiritual chemistry, which isn't religious, but kind of like your confidence, your worth, your values, like how you see yourself in the world. And you resonate. Chemistry happens when 2 or more of those kind of kick in, which is why you can be out on a date with someone and find them completely physically attractive and have that physical chemistry, and then you're not attracted to them. You don't want to go out with them more because one of these other ones didn't kick in. It's also why you can be on a date with someone you don't find that physically attractive, but as you get to know them over time, suddenly you're like, I can't get this guy out of my head, right? Like, I'm really attracted to this guy. It's because some of these others kicked in, right? These other levels. So while physical is instant, it can take a while for you to understand somebody's kind of emotional openness and level and resonate with them on that. It can take a while for you to understand someone's confidence and esteem and value and worth and be able to resonate with that. It doesn't happen immediately. So people are trying to make this quick decision on whether they're going to be attracted to or resonate or have that chemistry with someone, and not giving it enough time, right, for some of these other deeper ones to develop. So you're ruling somebody out that had you just gotten to know them a little longer and one of these others kicked in, right, then you would have been like, this is a person that I can kind of see myself hanging out with more. And I think that's a shame, right, that it's a very instant gratification kind of society when it comes to dating. I need to know, and I need to know right now. Are we gonna get along on every level? And you just can't figure it out that quickly.
So how long does someone have to give themselves about going out with them when it comes to saying, okay, you know what, wasted enough time?
You know, so I kind of, when people say, should I keep going, Rita, should I keep going out on dates? You'll know, right, if one of these others doesn't kick in. So you have to kind of be in tune with yourself and ask yourself. But if you can say that there's some mild attraction, whether it's on the spiritual level, the physical level, the intellectual level, if you can say yes to that there's some kind of mild attraction, if you're having fun, right, and if the other person has good character, isn't doing anything that's lying, deceptive, cheating, stealing, you know, you find out he's a murderer, she's a murderer, whatever, right? If they have good character, you're having fun, and there's a mild attraction, keep going until you say no to one of those questions. I mean, the minute you don't have a mild attraction, it's not gonna work on some level. The minute you're not having fun, it's not gonna work. The minute you find out someone has poor character, it's not gonna work. So just keep going until you can say no to one of those. And if you can keep saying yes, you're probably gonna feel that other thing kick in that you need to go, this is kind of serious. Like, I wanna see where this goes.
Perfect, thank you so much. Now, Dave, what is the best way to help make a relationship succeed? Now, you're talking about communication. Now, tell me more about, you know, the different factors that are needed to be able to make a relationship succeed.
Well, first of all, let me say that was a great answer. I love that whole fast food approach to dating and immediate gratification. And secondly, in terms of your question, I think really what it comes down to for long-term success, it's always going to be about selection. Selection is key. It's exactly what she was saying. Are you meeting someone that you have an affinity for, and you connect with them on an emotional, spiritual, physical, in all those categories? Do you have similar values? Does life look this, you know, do you see life in similar ways? Do you want similar things? You have, you know, similar beliefs, values, ideas like that. And I think that's, you know, long term, I think that's ultimately going to be the test of time, essentially. You know, because if you're very far apart in your lifestyle choices, or what you think you should be doing, or where you should live, or how you should raise your kids, or whatever, it's ultimately not going to work. You can have all the greatest communication techniques in the world, but if one person, we were talking earlier about like money, for instance. If one person is a scrimper and saver, and one person is a spendthrift, it's all coming my way and throwing it around. That's going to be a problem, and I don't think all the communication in the world isn't going to, paper over that. So it's really about finding similar values and beliefs, and I think that's the key for long-term success.
Well, it's kind of complement what Rita just said, basically. So that's definitely good. Now, Marjorie, what should someone look into a relationship? I mean, if we follow through with Dave, what makes a relationship succeed, what should you look originally for it to succeed?
One of the things that people really need to look at is themselves and how they feel while interacting with this person. Kind of a way to define love, a different way to define it is, I love myself the most when I'm relating to you. And when people think of that, when you're relating to someone else, it creates an energy. Every two people have an energy. If you think of all the different friends in your lives, you have some friends that you're really serious with, and others you could be dancing on tables and being goofy with. And so, when do you feel best about you, and how are you with this person? And tying into what both of you said, it's really, there are so many levels of connection, and, spiritual, emotional, intellectual, physical. When people think of, chemistry, they think physical only, but there's so many levels: social, community, values, and we want so much to put people into boxes, to give them context, and that's easier when you're very young, high school, college, and you know everybody, so you know what box they fit into. But when you're meeting people for the first time, you don't know what box to put them in, and so we're trying to keep creating the box and being able to define them, and because of that, we're not allowing ourselves just to get to know the person and how they make us feel, how we feel when we're with them.
Can I say something about?
Please, yes.
I love what you said about how I feel about myself, right? So one thing that I do tell my clients is, and this is a difference between the men and the women communication, right? Is the women come home and they ask themselves, I wonder if he liked me. I wonder if he thought that I was attractive. I wonder if he thought I was funny. I wonder if he's going to ask me out again. I wonder if when really they should be coming home going, how did I feel about myself on this date? Did I feel respected? Did I feel heard? Did I feel safe? Did I feel like, was I having a good time? Did I feel relaxed? Did I feel secure? Like, how was I? But instead, they're focused on, what did this guy think of me, right? And if they just flipped that and really paid attention to how they feel about themselves, being in the presence of this person, they have so they'll come back, oh, I hope I go on the second date, and they'll go down this whole thing about why, and then I'll say, well, tell me how you felt about yourself on the date. Well, he kind of talked over me, and he told me to put my hair down. He didn't like it up, and and I was, so how do you feel? I didn't really feel good about myself. So why do you want to go on a second date with this guy? I don't know, right? But they don't look at it that way. So I think that's so important. Yeah. So important.
Now, when let's say past the dating process, and then you actually develop a relationship. Now, I know that one of the major setback for a lot of couples is jealousy. Now, Rita, what would you say when it comes, like, we all know that jealousy is among many, many different couples, and it depends on how each and every one feels about themselves, as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
If someone feels less likely to be pretty or handsome or whatever, they will feel like the other person has higher value. How do you kind of like make it an understanding process between both genders?
Yeah, I tell people, okay, I'm not going to even get into it whether jealousy is good or bad or healthy or not healthy, because people have debates over that all the time. You shouldn't be jealous, you should be envious. But let's just say jealousy happens. It's a part of life, and it happens in relationships. I think the biggest mistake I see are people will handle that emotion incorrectly. So I treat it like it's an emotion, right? And they'll either wallow in the emotion, right? So they're just swimming around in jealousy, and they don't want to get out of the jealousy pool, right? So they're just staying buried in it. Or they'll deny it, right? They'll feel it, and they'll be like, no, I'm not jealous. I shouldn't be jealous. It's, I'm going to totally deny that and pretend like I didn't feel it. And if you deny it, or if you wallow in it, right, you're not expressing it and releasing it. So it's going to stay, it's going to remain. So I think the biggest mistake is that people aren't allowing themselves to feel the emotion, but then more importantly, work through it. So how do you work through it? You have to ask why did I feel this? What's the lesson? Why is this happening to me? What's the blessing? What's a contribution? What's value that I'm getting? We think it's a negative thing, but if you flip it and say, what am I taking away from feeling jealous right now? It might be something you need to do differently. It might be something you need to ask and talk about with your partner. It might be a way about yourself that you realize you're kind of like lower in self-esteem in an area than you thought that you need to develop. But if you don't get to that question saying, what am I learning from this? What's the blessing? Why am I grateful for feeling jealousy right now? Like, what's the takeaway? And then employ that in your life, right? That's the key to moving past the emotion. And all too often, I think people just stay stuck in it, or they deny it, and then they never get to that next level of what can I do to change this situation, right? To learn, move, and grow from it, communicate with my partner about it so that we grow as a couple as well, and then kind of address that issue, right? And I think that's a big mistake that people make when it comes to jealousy. They just kind of feel it and turn their head away, or they feel it and then they just want to stay in it. They just want to carry it around everywhere they go.
Good point. Now, there's actually what we call the 5 love languages, okay? And I know, Dave, that you feel that there's 7 of them.
I was going to say, I don't think there are 5, right?
There's more than 5, which is, like gift and words of affirmation. You said that there's 7. What would be the 2 extra?
Well, see, I created this sort of is a product that I created a long time ago. And when I first started coaching, I used to talk about 5 love languages, and necessity is the mother of invention. So I thought I would always forget 1 or 2, honestly. And I just hated that. So I thought, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a device. And I love to take a lot of information and compound it or make it simple to remember. So I created a device, and I call it the Hug and Kiss Hierarchy. So it's an the initial letters there. And so the 2 that I think Dr. Chapman doesn't talk about in his book, which is a fantastic book though, he doesn't talk about the fact that some people's number 1 love language, what needs to happen for them to feel loved, is the I in KISS is important priority. Some people feel loved when they feel like they're this, we talk about the jealousy thing. Anytime there's a challenge in a relationship, it's typically because someone or something seems more important than them. Some people's main love languages, they just need to know that they're the center of that person's universe, or they're the most important thing. If you choose your friends over your partner, you got a problem. If you choose watching the game over your partner, you've got a problem. If your partner's not feeling well and you don't take care of them, you've got a problem. So that's where that jealousy piece comes in, about feeling like an important priority. And then the other one that he doesn't really talk about, I don't think as much, is the final S is about soul connection. And soul connection is whether it's about intimacy and physical sensuality, sexuality, and also spirituality too. There's the idea that they want a soul connection where it's almost like someone can finish the other person's sentences. They're so aligned and in simpatico, I guess you'd say, they understand one another at such a level that soul connection, I think, is an important one too, in addition to the other ones that Dr. Chapman identified. But for me, it's easy to have that that device where I can just go right down HUGKISS, and it's
So you feel
it's
that
valuable.
if you understand, I mean, most people have more than just one love language. It's a combination of one or
Oh,
two,
yeah.
because it's not just words of affirmation that you could just feed your significant other with all the great words that they're going to feel confident about themselves. So it's a combination of one or two or three that makes them whole.
Right. I literally help them break down the hierarchy. So I know it's like your exact combination. So if you know the combination, you can crack open the safe anytime. So what's the love language or the combination that's going to make someone feel incredibly loved? And when you know what it is, and individuals are different. Like you may have dated someone whose love language is, what I call human touch or physical touch, and then someone else's is words of affirmation, or they may be very different, or someone's is gifts and presents.
Yes.
That's how some people feel loved. Now, if you treat a gifts and presents person the way physical touch, they're very, very different, and you're not going to connect. So again, when you understand what the hierarchy is and it's not like they prefer it. They need to feel that in order to feel loved. And I think that's the gift of understanding that hierarchy. When you know what your partner needs to feel, and you have the flexibility and the creativity to be able to help them feel that in the way they want to feel it, and say that, yeah, my partner deserves to be loved more than they've ever been loved before. And if you know what it takes to do that and to break that code, if you have it, you'll be able to connect with them easily and often anytime you want to. And I think that's just key to keeping a relationship going.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thanks.
Marjorie, you've mentioned the importance of shifting your perspective to that of your own. Expand more on that, please.
Well, it's so interesting. It ties into exactly what Rita was just saying. So I often tell my clients, I hear the same kind of thing that you were describing. What is he thinking? What does he want? What could I do to get him to feel this way? And I tell them to visualize a light switch on the wall and just flip the switch when they start having those thoughts. Wait a second, what do I want? Because they spend all of their time with their thoughts and concerns about the other person. And then they lose themselves. And then they begin a relationship in which they acquiesce, and they are completely lost. They're not part of it. You can't be an equal partner in that way. So I say, flip the switch. What do I want?
Good, very good. Now, I know you were talking about, you follow a principle of Gottman, right? Which is like stonewalling. I think this is the 7 principles to make a marriage work.
Right.
This is one of his bestseller. Elaborate more on his principle compared to what you offer to your clients.
Well, the main theory behind a lot of the Gottman work is that, we tend to focus on problems at a very surface level. And, you could do that all day long, and then you just kind of play whack-a-mole. I mean, you go in with this problem and hit it, and then the next problem pops up. And, most problems are not about the problem. There's an underlying issue that really needs to be dealt with. There's an underlying dream, there's an underlying meaning. And so if you could get down to that, then we could really solve it. And so, when we deal with the problems at the top, and when people talk about communication issues, it's because they're dealing at that level, and then they just stay in the same place and circle around. But what you need to do is get down deeper to what's really beneath it. What's the meaning behind? Why is this so important to me?
Excellent. Now, Rita, when you talk about attraction, you caution to be aware of the bubble. What do you mean by that?
Oh, the bubble. Yeah, I forgot about the bubble. Okay, so the best way I can describe it is, let's say that I'm going to let me give you an analogy. Let's say that I'm going to go buy a new car, okay? So I go on the car lot and I see this shiny red sports car. And I run over to it and I'm like, oh, I love this sports car, right? And I'm like, it is sexy, I feel good in it, like smell it, it smells so good, right? I'm in love with this sports car. And I just get so attached to the sports car. And then all of a sudden the sales guy comes over and he's like, well, would you like to hear the gas mileage of this car? And I'm like, no. Would you like to know how much it costs? No, like I don't wanna know the price, I don't wanna know. Would you like to know how much you're gonna have to pay in repairs every year? No, absolutely not, do not tell me that, right? I don't wanna ask questions about it. I just wanna stay in this nice bubble where this car smells good and I think this is the right car for me, and I'm happy and I'm excited and I'm all like in this really happy bubble about the car. The minute I start asking real questions, right, the bubble could pop. I could find out that I can't afford it, that I can't repair it, that it's not really good for driving wherever I want to go, right? And because I know that, I'm going to be very hesitant to ask those questions. Well, we do that in dating, right? There's this bubble, and it's like, oh, well, the minute I actually start asking these questions, what if I find out this person isn't right for me? right? I mean, literally, that's like what's going on. The minute I ask this, I might find out we're not compatible. And it feels so good right here in the bubble. It feels so good doing the flirting and just, being in this like kind of like suspended, fantasy universe where it's just us, Dan, it's just me and you, right? And there's no one else. We're not hanging out with anybody else or anything. So now I don't want to ruin that because this feels really good. And so that's what I mean by beware of the bubble, because what you do is you start falling into getting committed to somebody without knowing about compatibility, right? And so you get committed before you're compatible, and before you know that you're compatible. And when you do that, it's like game over, right? You're gonna justify away and rationalize away all these things that will pop up and say, red flag, this isn't the right relationship for you. And you're gonna be like, shh, go away, because I'm already committed. Like, I wanna make it work, right? Now I'm committed and I never knew if we were compatible. But you have to find out compatibility before you get committed. And you can only do that by asking questions. So you really have to be aware and say, how long have I stayed in the bubble? Right? Have I started asking the questions that really matter to talk about the things we talked about, our values, our beliefs, our money philosophies, our goals, our, religion, and whatever it is, right, that would make somebody compatible with you. Have I started asking the real questions? And you can't be afraid to pop that bubble. You have to kind of flip that and say, if that bubble gets popped and that person's not right for me, I'm grateful that I found that out. I'm grateful that I've cleared and made space for the right person to come my way by sending on somebody who wasn't the right person for me. So that's what I mean by beware of the bubble, because it can really lead you down a path you don't want to go down.
Interesting. Now, in a society that is based on instant gratification, such as all the date app that we have, like Tinder and all the others, do people even allow themselves to really go past that bubble?
It's hard. I mean, once you get coaches and therapists, I think they do, right? And I mean, some people do, right? But it's hard. I mean, we do. I mean, it's more than that too with instant gratification. I mean, Keurig, right? If we don't have our coffee in 3 seconds, I'm gonna be mad, right? I think they say now if people are on hold for more than 5 seconds, they hang up the phone.
Correct.
They wait 3 seconds for a web page to load, or they're done with that page, right? So it's like ingrained in us for this instant need for connection gratification to get what we want. And because of that, it's very hard to allow the space, right, for that to develop, because it means you have to be in an uncomfortable place. And I don't use uncomfortable as a bad word, but it just means you have to be in a place that isn't happy, comfortable. You know what's going on, you know what's going to happen. You have to allow for some unknown. And it's hard for people to work through that. So if you have the right people in your life, whether those are professionals or friends or people that have healthy relationships that you're modeling off of, you're probably going to be more likely to allow for that, right, than you would on your own, and just kind of stay in that, again, in that little bubble and need for instant gratification.
Great answer. Thank you so much. Now, Dave, when it comes to psychology and physiology of attraction, is there some secret kind of like key factor that makes all the difference?
Well, I think the key to both, if you're talking about attraction, so today we're going to talk about masculine and feminine, what they need, and what are the difference. The one thing that probably is unique that we are both masculine and feminine are incredibly attracted to, talks about the mindset attraction and the physiology attraction is about confidence. It's really about confidence. It's how do you hold yourself? Who do you believe you are? What value do you have? It's about, again, knowing your value. So if a confident man is going to be seen as really attractive to a woman, and by the same token, a confident woman is going to be seen as really attractive, and they have physiology that goes with that feeling, and they have a mental acuity and a belief that goes with that. So that's a really attractive thing, and that's going to be the one that I think crosses over the most. Confidence is just, it doesn't matter who it is, it's just a really attractive quality. And it's the ideal, I think. And I think to the point that both of you made about like when you're on the date, or you were saying when you go home and think about it, oh, is he going to call? Did he like me? What did he think? I don't think that thought process goes on at home. I think that's going on sitting
right
across the
the
table
date,
at Starbucks. Like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Why did I say that? That was so stupid. Oh my gosh, was he looking? He's looking at his watch. He doesn't like me. It's that thing. And that's more so, I think, common for the feminine, because feminine tends to navigate by emotion, whereas masculine navigates from analytical. And so a logical standpoint. And now there's plenty of crossover, and that's not, but that's sort of the home plate, so or the home wiring, if you will. So I think that emotional process it's more, and I think to the point you were making earlier too, I think when you're in that date, you feel like you just want to win. You want to win. You want to make sure you get to date 2 in order to win, to get to the next level. And I think that also opens up in situations where you're talking about abundance and scarcity too. Because like if you've got these apps and you can just keep flipping left forever, and there's always, or flipping right, I can't remember which one,
Yeah.
and there's
to right.
always someone
Left,
else.
yes, right now.
You know, it feels like there's plenty of abundance. So sometimes you can focus too much on the abundance and not focus on the person in front of you right now and give it the due deference, I guess, of your time and focusing on that. So, you know, I think it's about managing those expectations. Are we in an abundant universe where this doesn't have to work out? There's all kinds of people out there, or you know what? It's a scarce universe, and I really got to make this date work.
That's really
and
big.
so that's a huge continuum there.
Yeah, and you're right. I do notice that more in my female clients, right? Women clients, they are operating from a scarcity-based mindset. Not that men don't, but I've noticed it more in women, and what I mean by that is there's a lack in the world. So there aren't going to be enough men that come my way. Maybe what if this is the best one that comes my way? What if another one doesn't come? So I need to try to really work out this relationship that's not right? Because there's a scarcity in the world. Whereas a lot of the men that I've worked with really operate on this abundant type of mindset where there's an abundance in the world and there are plenty of people and there are plenty of people who are going to come my way. So they're able to do things like set and enforce boundaries and do all of these things that really help them navigate a relationship, I think, a little tighter and stronger. I do want to put a flip. Can I put a flip on something?
Please do.
You know, I love everything you say. I totally agree with all of it. But I caution people sometimes to not mix up confidence with self-esteem. I believe that confidence is a personality trait, so it's what people see externally. So I can walk in a room and I can shake hands and I can make eye contact and I will be more attractive, like I will dominate the room that way, but inside I could have low self-esteem, I could really be doubting myself, and too often people make an assumption based off the confidence that person has high self-esteem without asking the questions to find that out. So when I was talking about asking real questions on a date, be wary of making assumptions off a personality trait, right? Like, I like to travel. People make assumptions on that all the time. He said he likes to travel. I'm like, well, what does that tell you? Well, he's adventurous and he's a risk taker. And I'm like, where did you get that from? What if this guy likes to go to the Wisconsin Dells, not that there's anything wrong with the Dells, once a year, every year, same hotel, same meals, same deals, and that's his idea of travel, and he loves to travel. They're like, well, that's not what I meant by it, but you assumed it, right? So the same thing happens with self-esteem and confidence. Sometimes people assume high self-esteem because somebody has a lot of confidence, and I say, don't just make that assumption. You still have to ask the questions. You will be attracted more to somebody with confidence, but don't assume that to be that they're healthy and a good place with high self-esteem, because sometimes it's the opposite. The opposite can be true.
But do you think by asking the question, hey, do you have a high self-esteem? No,
that's
mine
not the
sucks.
way you're going to do it, though, right? You find out, like, it's through somebody. So does somebody apologize for their life a lot? Like, oh, this is my car, but I'm sorry for the condition of the car, and I'm gonna buy a new one later. Or like, oh, yeah, I have a job. I mean, it's not great, but I'll work up to a better job one day, right? Like, they feel apologetic for their life. That can tend to be a sign, right, that they have low self-esteem. So you have to watch for those subtle cues, and you have to know what to look for. And so you're not going to just say, do you have high self-esteem? But you can't just, if you make the assumption that they do because they're very confident and can work a room, you're not going to be paying attention to those things, right? Because you will have already made that link in your head. So.
But it is said that low self-esteem does not exist. It's them esteem. You let others esteem you.
Yeah, you
to a certain extent.
You're jumping ahead, like something I was going to talk about later, right? That I do believe that no one can love you more than you love yourself, right? So no one can like you more than you like yourself. No one can trust in you more than you trust yourself. No one can invest in you more than you invest in yourself, right? So it really does start with you, and if that's low, and I think it can be low, I can have low love for myself, and it has nothing to do with anybody else, right? It's something that I've come up with on my own, and so I think that low self-esteem really can exist, and there are versions of that, right? But at the end of the day, you have to develop that in yourself so that somebody will love you as much as you love you, because if you don't, nobody else is going to.
Interesting. Do you want to add something to that, Marjorie?
Yeah, so the confidence piece tends to be, when you look at people who are what I call performing for love, they're out there, they're on dates, they're meeting people, but they're performing. They're constantly acting, they're constantly being what they think the other person wants them to be. They're exuding confidence, but that has nothing to do with esteem. And it's funny, when you mentioned if the person says, well, I have really bad self-esteem, that's actually really attractive in a way. Because if you think about it, we all try to hide our vulnerabilities. And we all have low self-esteem at points, right? We all have things about ourselves that we feel bad about, that we don't love about ourselves. And nobody loves themselves. When people come in, they're like, are you going to tell me I have to love myself? And it's like, Yes and no, right? Because it's not linear. You don't work this path and then all of a sudden you love yourself and all your things are going to happen. That's kind of horizon living, right? Things will be great when I get to this point. The reality is, within moments of each day, we love ourselves, and within moments of each day, we really feel bad about things that we do and we are. But when you could allow those, when you could just allow them, it makes a big difference besides shoving them down. You know, it's a very different thing. And when you could actually put them on the table, that's intimacy.
But see, to me, that is part of high self-esteem, right? Is being able to acknowledge your low points, your flaw, like, and be able to communicate and talk, and then want to grow and learn from them, right? Because there's also a difference going, yeah, I acknowledge where I don't love myself, right? Like, I don't like this about myself, but then there's no action to ever change it, and you just constantly stay in this, I don't love this, and a difference between somebody that's like, I recognize when I don't love myself, but I really want to work on that, right? I really want to take action. So recognizing it is part of high self-esteem, I think. I don't
Absolutely,
think it's,
absolutely.
But is there like any period where people always or often says, when I get a better job, I'll feel better about myself. When I get a new girlfriend, I'll be...
Of course.
Now, even though we are somewhat looking for a healthy and happy relationship, even though when we have it, we still want for something better.
We already do, right? So if you have that want, if that is what your desire is if that's what you're passionate for, you already have it because it's part of who you are. If we're waiting for the perfect relationship or the perfect job, you know, we're always going to be waiting because we'll just keep raising the bar. If those things are part of the things that you long for, they already are part of who you are.
That's a good one. You want to add something to that,
No.
Rita?
right?
I'd love to add something to it. I think that's a great point, and I think if you're constantly looking to fall in love with perfection, the truth of the matter is perfection is the lowest standard there is. It doesn't exist. We know that no one is perfect, and true intimacy is really falling in love with someone's imperfections, and seeing them and just loving them for who they are. And I think that's what a true healthy relationship is about. It's not having to be right. It's not, you know, having to be better than or not having, nope, not good enough, not gonna happen. It's really saying, wow, I really appreciate that you're vulnerable enough to admit that, and from that place that you can meet and connect with them and really take your relationship to a level that's not possible any other way, just to be that real and vulnerable. And I think Brene Brown has done some amazing work in vulnerability.
She has.
And it's just powerful. It is a total game changer.
That need to be right. That's something that I tell people in the emotional attractiveness, which being emotionally open. Are you emotionally healthy to navigate a relationship? When you get down to well, it's my way, I'm right, you're wrong, right? If even just one partner operates from that perspective, there's not going to be you're not going to be able to overcome the hurdles, right, in a relationship. If both people operate from that perspective, right, then it's really bad. So you have to really make sure that someone is open to personal growth and development, right, which really means being able to say, how can I navigate this differently, right, like, and drop the I'm right, you're wrong mentality, which is
helping people to think dialectically. There's a kernel of truth in this person's point of view and a kernel of truth in mine, and the real truth is probably somewhere in the middle. It might not be smack in the middle.
Does anyone here in the audience would like to be able to share their experience, anything that has to do with everything that we just talked about? It's sometimes, you know, it could be tiring to hear each other talk, so it's important to have the feedback of the audience. Anyone wants to add or share something with us before we continue? You could just go to the mic and nothing. No? Okay, we can continue then.
I think it means we're doing great.
Yeah, they're doing great. I mean, it means they have no problem. They're
I
fine.
think we feel
they're navigating
every question,
everything perfectly then,
Maybe
right?
they're thinking, I had a question. No, they already respond. Now, when it comes to relating, now, of course, this seminar is about understanding both genders. Now, how can we relate to your significant other? What would be the tools that someone can have to be able to properly relate? I know it's about communication, which is the core of every relationship. But what other ways would you suggest, Rita, when it comes to understanding each other?
So I really think listening is one of the most important things that are lacking in the communication between people. People are doing the jump. We talked about this on a date, right? You're not present, you're not there, you're thinking ahead to the next thing. And I think that when it comes to relating to someone, just being present and listening and reflecting back what you heard. There was I can't even remember, there was a New York Times article that gave an example of this, and it said, picture, for instance, your husband or your boyfriend or whatever is at the window and they go, oh wow, look at this bird, right? Look at this pretty bird outside. and you're like, hey, what's for dinner, right? Like you're just like, huh, yeah, and then you're like, what's for dinner, right? They feel unacknowledged, they feel unappreciated, they feel disrespected. But if you took the minute to go, oh wow, yes, that is a very interesting bird, even if I think birds are like the most boring thing in the world, right? If I take a minute to acknowledge that he thought that was important enough to point out the bird to me, right? And I totally dismissed that, right? That's a bit, so it's hearing what someone's saying, reflecting it back, right? Not necessarily having to act like you love something too that you don't love, but letting someone know they were heard and you didn't dismiss what they said, and that you acknowledge and appreciate what they choose to share with you, right? Even if you don't find it to be the most fascinating subject in the world, that person still thought that it was important enough to share that with you. And I think that's how we can relate better. But to do that, you have to be present. I have to be hearing what you say so that I can reflect it back to you. So that's an exercise I give people in life, to start repeating back what people are saying, you know, certain points, not the whole thing, right? Don't but like certain points of it, like say certain things back so you get in the habit of being present. I did that as a lawyer, right? I had to sit there with my client. Trust me, when I was first a lawyer, my mind was all ready to like, I know you're gonna lose and this is what's gonna happen, or I know you're gonna win and this is insane. But the minute that I just said, okay, so you're upset because your tenant broke the window, right? Or you're upset, they just felt better just from that interaction. Sometimes they didn't even want to move forward with the litigation or the argument because they felt like they had been heard, right? And I think, and appreciated. So I think if people can practice that in relating, that's a huge step in being able to relate to their partners.
But do you feel that when it comes to people, I mean, most of the time when they don't understand each other is because they don't listen. But the reason why they don't listen, is it because of past practices or past relationship that they probably encountered the same issues in the past, or how did they break that pattern?
Well, it really comes from, it's a skill that you can learn. Listening is a skill that can be learned. And it's hard work to practice listening. But it really is about noticing when you're jumping ahead in your mind, right? I call it like, I wrote an article once called The Kiss Before the Kiss, right? Where it was like, I was gonna finally kiss this guy. I remember I was so young. We were gonna have our first kiss. It was gonna be so exciting. And already in my mind, I was like, I wonder if we're gonna kiss again. And we hadn't even kissed like the first time. And I totally missed the kiss because we were kissing. But in my mind, I was always, is he gonna be my boyfriend? And like, what's gonna happen? And like, I was not present in the moment, right? So you can train your brain through meditation and through, you know, journaling, or through, you know, focused thinking exercises and through verbal exercises to really be present and listen. I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing. I just think society, instant gratification, social media, all of this stuff has taught us to live in this very distracted world. And I think you're able to remove some of that and focus again through hard work. I don't really think that it's something that can't be learned.
Interesting. Dave, what do you think that your spouse or partner most need from you in order to maintain that successful relationship that we're talking about? I mean, if we continue just on what Rita has to say, do you feel that there's any additional tools that they need to be able to feel that, okay, I've done everything I can to be able to make this successful?
Let me start with commenting on what she said, because it was great. I love that story too, about the looking out the window with the bird, and I believe that was Dr. Gottman.
Okay,
He talked about that, so nice pulling that together. And I think the key thing, the distinction I would make there is I don't think anyone's misbehaving. I think a lot of times people just don't know. You know, Oprah says, if you know better, you do better. And so in that topic, the thing I would add is that I think when you have an understanding of the underlying need of the gender. So feminine navigates from emotional a lot, and the underlying need is to feel safe. And so safe is about being heard and seen and appreciated and understood. Whereas masculine tends to need to be, is about respect. They need to be respected and appreciated too. So we both need to appreciate one another, but it's just, it's a different way that we connect. So the point though, and you were asking about, you know, what does your spouse need from you? I think really what it is once you commit and you're in a relationship, it's really about having one another's backs. Really being committed to one another and just focusing on, you know, again, being vulnerable and saying, like, you know, I might have messed that up, or listen, I need to talk to you about that thing that happened. And, you know, about taking on that communication, hearing it, maybe copping to it if you maybe fell a little bit short. My wife says one of the things that she loves most about me, and I do not always do it, is that I'll say, yeah, you're right, that's true. I fell short there, and that's not how I want to be. You're right, I'm sorry. Like, just owning that, I think, is just a huge, and again, I don't always do it, but I'm really pleased that I've gotten to that point where I can to that point. But I think it really is about having someone's back and being on the same page and knowing that you're a team and we're in this together and what needs to happen in order for this thing to work. And I think that's
A relationship requires work and marriage and
absolutely.
all. So,
Darn.
yeah.
It's compromise. It's understanding the other person's point, and not even necessarily having to always agree with them. Sometimes you're just not going to agree because you have just a difference of opinion. But it's how do you navigate over that, and how do you get to a win-win, a negotiation of sorts.
It's also the knowledge on how you deliver the message.
Yeah.
Because if, let's say, you deliver it aggressively, they're going to go into the defensive. If you
We know safety.
Exactly,
Is
yes.
the number one need,
Mhm.
right? So I have to just be careful about the way the message is delivered. Sure. And again, on the other side too, if you're feeling like, I just told you how I feel about this, and now you're not respecting me because you're insulting me, like from masculine, like that. Now you've got a big misunderstanding that's starting to gain energy and churning, and it can go badly, quickly.
Very
I think
quickly.
we all know.
Yes, we all know that.
You were going to say something, sorry.
So, back to the whole idea of the communication, part of the problem is that we hear 5 times as fast as we can speak, right? And so we have all this extra time. So when we're waiting for someone to speak, our mind is churning. And all the things that we're taught, make good eye contact and your body language and repeat back what the person has said so that you could show them you're listening, I think that's all kind of crap. Because if you're really listening, you're listening. If you're in a conversation, you're in a conversation. So it's really more about, paying attention to this moment on purpose in a particular way, being mindful, being in this moment. And, that would include things like, how many of us are in a conversation and you're already planning what your reply is going to be
Yes.
while you're still in the conversation, or in a conversation, those who pontificate, if you're going to pontificate, write a blog. It's not meant for a conversation, right? So.
That's funny because I run a singles group in the area called Singles in the Suburbs, and it's got, I don't know, I think in the DC, Maryland, it's got like 4,000 members now, somewhere around that. But we do this one thing called coffee chats, where we'll get together for coffee and we'll have topics that we discuss. And we have kind of like this object, I don't know, maybe it's a monkey or maybe it doesn't really matter what it is, a salt shaker. But you go around holding the salt shaker, holding the item, answering the question, and no one else can interrupt. Well, and then you pass it in order. So the people who are over here, they can't say anything, right, until that salt shaker or that item gets to them. So they're not allowed to kind of, it forces them to have to wait on responding, and then they start listening more because they don't want to repeat what's been said, or they're listening to what everybody says. And by the time it gets to them, they'll say, I was going to say this, but now I have a completely different way of looking at it because of what you're talking about. That need to kind of interrupt and say what I'm going to say and do it. So by an exercise just like that, thinking about something like that, saying, I'm not going to speak, I'm going to provide for, people hate space, right? People hate pauses. Like, I'm going to allow you to say, and then I'm going to let it pause for a minute before I respond. That's kind of what you're doing in that exercise of passing around the totem and talking.
Well, it's anxiety. It's sitting alone in that space. That's so hard for people. That's why how many people right before they go to bed at night, they flip through their phone one last time because they don't want to lay in bed alone with their thoughts, and so that space is very difficult, and we do that in conversations too. It's like go, 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 gotta multitask. And once you're able to master that space and be okay with it, you're able to relate to people differently.
Interesting. But then when it comes to the whole idea of, like we were mentioning about relating to your significant other or to a date, I mean, usually it takes at least a good several weeks to really understand, well, that's in the dating side, to really understand what the other person is all about. So, and people are really afraid to ask the wrong question, like the bubbling part, because they're afraid that, if I miss this one, will I ever date again? So sometimes they learn to settle. And when they settle, they realize that, oops, I made another mistake. And they repeat the same problem over and over again, or for all the future relationship. Like when you go into a toxic relationship, for example, all your future boyfriend or girlfriend, you're going to say, well, this is all I deserve. So how can you change this kind of mentality? How can you allow someone to say, you know what, I need to put a stop, I need to put a break here and start changing my whole perception?
You know, what I really work with people on, I'd say 3 key areas is mindset, first of all, right? Because your thoughts become your feelings, which lead to your actions, which create your results. So if you want new results, it's not enough to change what you're doing. So it's not about what website you're on or meeting people or how you're talking, or you have to go change your thoughts. You have to change your mindset. So I work with people on the mindset. That's the first thing, right? Really getting your thoughts in alignment with the results that you want. And then that allows you to do 2 really crucial things, which is working on boundary setting, like standards and boundaries. So living your life in the way that would make you feel good about yourself and who you are in the world, and then having boundaries, but knowing how to enforce them, right? Okay. Once you feel good about your standards and your boundaries, right, and you know how to enforce them, and you're coming at things from an abundance mindset instead of a scarcity mindset, you can really start recognizing your value and recognizing your worth. And then it makes that easier to set. So like, for example, I'll have a client that says, I had a great time. This is my favorite story. I had a great time with this guy. He would be a great date again. I'm not going out with him again. And I said, why? Well, because he keeps texting me, asking me on a second date, and I want him to pick up the phone and call me. And I said, okay, well, did you tell him that you would like him to pick up the phone and call you? He should just know. He should just know. And I said, oh, where are you going to meet mind readers? Where do they all hang out? I didn't know that that was a thing, that they all had a club and they all just go there and hang out. She was like, fine, Rita, fine. You know, I said, maybe I should tell him, right? But it's because she didn't know how to set that boundary, right? To say, you know what, I really like it. Like, texting's not my thing, and I really like it when someone picks up the phone and calls. It's exciting. It makes me feel whatever, right? Like, you just, and sure enough, the guy's like, oh, okay, fine, right? He wanted to make her happy. And so he wanted to pick up the phone and call her, right? And so once you know how to, and then you realize somebody who doesn't, let's say he had just kept texting her, he did not respect her or want her or like her or whatever it was enough to want to honor that boundary. And when her value is high, she'll be okay walking away from that because she'll know there's an abundance in the world. This isn't it. So it really all works together, right? That mindset is crucial for you to be able to enforce boundaries and know your value and worth. They all work together. I think if you can handle those, you start really being able to navigate the right relationships and get out of the cycle of of commitment before compatibility and ignoring flags and not feeling good, about what you're doing. You start having more fun. That was the name of my date coaching program is take charge of your love life and have fun dating, right? Because when I talk to people, I was like, wouldn't you love to find your fulfilling love? They're like, Rita, that's great. I can't even think that far ahead because I can't get a second date, right? So I can't even imagine that. I just want to have fun when I'm out dating and I'm not having fun. And it's because of those 3 things, the boundary setting, the self-esteem, and the mindset. And once those are kind of cleaned up, they start having fun out there dating again, right? And that's crucial.
You were talking about mindfulness, sorry, Dave.
Okay.
Living at the moment.
Right.
A lot of people are always thinking about what am I going to do tomorrow or next week, or should I ask him to go out this way or that way? I mean, people tend to never live at the moment. How do you break that pattern?
No, they don't. Well, it takes a lot of work. It's a whole different way of being. We spend most of our time in the past or the future, actually much more in the future, and most of that time is spent worrying. 95% of the things we worry about never happen in the way we're worried about them. Other stuff happens and other great stuff happens. And even when we're in the present, we tend to be doing kind of a running commentary. Oh, I'm walking down the hall right now. Oh, I'm going to walk into the bedroom right now. We're just doing a commentary on what we're doing. And there's good news and the bad news, right? So the good news is most of our thoughts aren't true, these worried thoughts of the future. The bad news is we believe them, And so we spend all of this time worrying about this stuff that never is going to be, and we're missing this moment. We're just not being a part of it. And so to break it, you really need to kind of do check-ins with yourself. The first step, and there are formal mindfulness practices and informal mindfulness practices, and an informal practice would be basically doing a check-in with yourself. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? And where am I experiencing it in my body? Because every feeling we feel somewhere in our body. And then be more curious about that. Go deeper into what does that feel like. Okay, I feel this clenched feeling in my chest. Okay, what does that feel like? Okay, it feels like there's a fist. Okay, what does that feel like? Oh, it's squeezing harder. What does that feel like? And then you just kind of say to yourself, can I allow this? And once you're able to get to the point where you can allow it and figure out what it needs, the power decreases, the enormity, the difficulty of these feelings that overtake us and leave us dysregulated. You're able to learn, you can actually tolerate any feeling,
David, you want to say something?
Well, now I want to reply to that. So
See?
the
Yeah.
thought there is, an emotion is really just a messenger, and so if you get the message, you don't have to throttle the messenger. So the emotion is just there to give you a lesson, something you need to know, something you need to do something differently, something you need to respond to, something you need to just take in and own and say, oh, okay, well, that's it.
Right.
So I think that's a powerful point. And I was going to say to your point about the great story about, I'm not going to see this guy anymore because he doesn't know that he should call me instead of text me because he's not a mind reader.
Right.
Like that happens so very often.
It does.
And not so much as you mentioned it as putting a boundary out there. It's really about understanding that masculine really does want to be a hero, and if a
Yes.
woman can see the hero in a man and say, hey, you know what, look, if my preference is, I'd prefer a phone call to a text. Would you be okay with that? And you're like, sure, I want to be a hero. I'll do it. And I think when you understand, so many women have been with men who haven't been heroic or haven't treated them great, and so they don't necessarily know that men really are wired to be a hero, and that you can bring out the very best in a man by assuming the best and giving him a clean slate at the beginning and saying, listen, I don't know if it works for you, but I prefer a phone call to a text. Are you
Beautiful.
okay with that? And they were like, oh, I can call you? Because there was a woman I
Right, there was
dated,
a woman
and she
last
said, who
week,
do you think
she
you
told
are
me, "Don't
calling
call
me?"
me.
Right. So we're trying to figure it out.
I feel bad. I always say that. I feel bad. Like, I was at this, I was a panelist for this thing called the Great Love Debate, and one girl gets up and she says, all you guys need to do is say hello, right? You don't need to come up with these cheesy lines and just come up to a girl and say hello, and we're going to respond favorably. And this guy shot up in the audience. He said, I'm calling you out on that because you were on the metro and I went up to you and I said hello and you were like, and he was just like, so I don't know what to do, right? So like there are all of these things that go back and forth like that, right? Where you just don't know, like you have this because somebody did something once, right? She's like, she did that because she assumed, right, that this guy was doing something, right,
Yes.
based on the past, or so you do all of these weird things, right? And the point is you have to follow what Dave says. Like that's,
Beautiful.
but you mentioned something too about in that whole thing that you just said about people not just meeting a person, not being able to be on a date and just meet a person, right? So something I did not tell you about me, I can't believe I didn't tell you about this, but I did this project called 35 Dates in 35 Days where I had been in a 5-year relationship and I came out of it and I decided to go out on 35 dates in 35 consecutive days. And I didn't know anything about the guys, their age, their race, what they did for a living, I didn't care. The point wasn't to find love, it was to meet people that I would normally not meet, and I had them pick the activity. So I had to do things I would normally not do, so I had to be uncomfortable, and I had to figure out what I did in response to being uncomfortable, right? And the big takeaway from there were lots of takeaways, but the big takeaway from that project was to not attach myself to the outcome. So when I go out on a date with Dave, right, like I'm not sitting there thinking, I hope he likes me, I hope this is romantic, I hope it works out. Instead, I'm thinking, why did this person cross my path? It could be for a romantic reason, it could be because he's going to tell me about something I should know about, or I'm going to tell him about something he should know about. Could be we have friends for each other. It could be he's going to treat me terribly. And that's going to give me a moment to enforce a boundary or to recognize a boundary that I have, or maybe I'm just going to impact his life in some way and I won't even know how. But I really believe if you go into that, there's always a reason. I wonder what the reason is, and you're not attached to it being a specific reason. You can be more present and engaged in trying to uncover what is the reason, right? When you're already attached to an outcome, you're kind of focused on, is everything lining up for that outcome? And you've got blinders on, and you're missing so much.
Very good point.
Or
Wow,
maybe the guy
that's-
will introduce you to your husband too.
Yeah, that's
And
how,
that's how it
so,
happened.
Yeah, so my husband, I met him from date 34. So
Wow,
date,
that's
date 34
right on time, huh?
introduced me to my husband, yeah.
Wow. Well, that's all the time we have for today. So I would really like to thank all of you, Rita, Dave, and Marjorie, for coming in today and sharing your amazing knowledge, especially like the amount of information that was given in just a short 1-hour seminar. So I'd like to thank you all for coming today. Really, you made this seminar amazing. Now we all know that there is a lot of singles, living in the DMV area and also all around the world, and they're all looking to find their significant other. And unfortunately for many, especially men, they tend to never really understand how women think. So that's one of the reasons why they do not have a great communication path with the significant other. So if you'd like to be able to get in contact with all the 3 guest panelists here, their information will be available on the lower third of the show and also on the credits at the end of the show. Also, I would like to thank our audience for coming here today and be able to, especially after the Thanksgiving holiday, you know, they've probably been in a food coma, but they still got out, came today, and attended the seminar. Also, this will be the last seminar of 2016, but we'll have a new series coming up in 2017 with other exciting topics about dating and relationship, in which that reminds me of a pretty interesting story. There's a New Yorker that comes down, that goes and tries to catch a metro, and then he finds a very odd-looking shaped bottle near the tracks. He goes and picks it up. It's all oily, all dirty, and he rubs it and cleans it, and a genie comes out of the bottle. Okay, and he said, you know what, thank you so much for saving me out of this claustrophobic place. I really appreciate it. I grant you one wish. So the genie goes, the New Yorker goes, said, you know what, the holidays are coming up. I'd like to be able to visit my family in Spain. Can you build a bridge from New York to Spain, because I'm afraid of flying? So the genie starts saying, are you out of your mind? Do you imagine the logistic behind building a bridge? I'm gonna have to hire other genies. I'm gonna have to pay workman compensation, the material. Forget about it, this is impossible. He said, I grant you another wish. So the New Yorkers start thinking about it, said, you know what? I would like to be able to understand women. Can you please give me the tools? I mean, why is one day they're this way, the other day they're that way? Why do you always change their mind? Why, I mean, I need this to be able to have a successful relationship. The genie looks at him and said, that bridge of yours, you wanted 2 lanes or 4 lanes? So that just shows you that, you know, how much effort it takes to be able to understand women. So my name is Dr. Dan Amzallag, and have yourself a wonderful day and a great 2016.